what we've done to put together for this meeting, which is termed as our annual meeting, is we kind of have a year in review. We're looking back at 2021 and what's on the horizon for this coming year. This is the time we do this. And so that's kind of the theme for these overall discussions we're going to have over the next few minutes. And instead of having a presentation, there's some really important topics that we wanted to bring up right away. That is the LOSUM update, Save the Manatee situation, and get a district update on things, and also the seagrass mitigation bill being proposed. So those are kind of at the top of our list here to go through. We're going to try to keep our discussions pointed and to the point. I sincerely appreciate everybody, especially being on this call from the agencies. So we have Colonel James Booth and other members of the Corps of Engineers on here. We also have Drew Bartlett and Jackie Zerla-Lippisch, obviously from the Water Management District, along with other members of the district team. We also have Representative Toby Oberdorf from state of Florida, and also Pat Rose from Save Manatee Club. So I want to give those kind of opportunities to go through this discussion, but we're going to start out kind of with LOSUM update. We have our Eve Samples and myself down on the agenda to kind of give an LOSUM update. So I want to get it over to Eve. Can you start us out with that discussion about LOSUM?
Sure. Thank you, Mark. So we are about 3 years into the LOSUM process, the new Lake Okeechobee System Operating Manual that is scheduled to take effect late this year. And from our perspective at the Rivers Coalition on the board, and also with Friends of the Everglades, where I'm executive director, we've seen this as a very transparent process, and we have had hope for improvement in terms of discharges, volumes received by the St. Lucie estuary. So just to refresh your memory about where we were at the end of the year, we were looking at a preferred plan identified by the Army Corps of Engineers that, as modeled, stands to reduce the average annual volumes to the St. Lucie estuary by about 37%. Compared to not taking any action. So that's an improvement. It's not quite as much as we had hoped for under an earlier plan identified last summer, but through the so-called optimization process, the St. Lucie relief was diminished a bit, but again, still better than what we've dealt with in recent history. It also reduces flows to the Lake Worth Lagoon and improves the situation for the Caloosahatchee estuary and triples the volume sent south to the Everglades, again, as modeled. So there's some new information that we want to bring to the Rivers Coalition membership today, because it is something that we've been concerned about. So at the January 12th meeting of the LOSUM project delivery team, the South Florida Water Management District, on behalf of the state of Florida, which the district is an agency of, asked for a control of a larger swath of lake water. So there's something called the water shortage management line that dictates how, when we're in drought conditions, more or less, below the line, agricultural users can receive cutbacks. All of us can receive cutbacks. Above the line, actually only environmental flows can receive cutbacks. So this is an important line, and it affects how operations are dictated. And if I can share my screen, Daryl, do I have the ability to do that?
Let me, I will do that. Let's see here.
I think it might just help to have this visual.
Yeah, it'd be good to put that.
What are you signed in as, Eve? Are you under?
I am just under my name.
Eve
At the bottom, if you hit.
I got you.
Okay.
I got you. I will make you co-host. Go ahead.
Okay.
You should be able to do that.
Okay. Can you see this slide?
Yes.
Okay, so this is the line we're talking about, the purple line at the bottom here. And this is a slide from the January 12th PDT meeting. So you can see under this new plan, flows south to the Everglades. We're envisioned to continue all the way down to that line, flows to the St. Lucie to the east here would be at zero through most of the lake stages. This is the lake depth on the left here. And then at higher lake levels, we still have a lot of risk. I don't want to diminish that. And then these are westward flows to the Caloosahatchee here, up to 2,000 in this band. So what changed is when the state of Florida, the Water Management District, asked for control of another 1.5 feet above this line, tracking roughly here. And you can see what we had been talking about all along in the LOSM process was the state of Florida dictating releases below this line. So now the state has requested control, explicit reliance on the district above this line. And that does give us pause, and Friends of the Everglades and Florida Oceanographic Society, Sanibel Captiva Conservation Foundation, Calusa Waterkeeper, and Conservancy of Southwest Florida last week sent a letter to Colonel Booth, and I appreciate Colonel Booth being here today and the rest of the Army Corps, asking the Army Corps to reject this request. And I want to be clear about why that is. Our concern is the political pressure that could be exerted on the state of Florida and the South Florida Water Management District to keep more water in the lake than is necessary during the dry season. And for those of you who track the Rivers Coalition, you know why that's a threat, but I'll restate it anyway. The reason it's a threat to the St. Lucie estuary is because if we keep more water than is necessary in Lake Okeechobee during the dry season, then we start the rainy season at a higher point on June 1st, and we are at a higher risk of toxic discharges from the lake during hurricane season, during the rainy season. And then on top of that, we are Friends of the Everglades. Withholding more water in the lake during the dry season also can starve the Southern Everglades of necessary flows, as well as the Caloosahatchee of dry season flows, because unlike the St. Lucie, the Caloosahatchee does need some dry season water. So we're concerned about this, and I want to acknowledge, because I know we have district leadership here today, that we have heard their response and we understand their response, and they're pledging to keep those beneficial southward and westward flows moving. Our concern is that this is a 10-year lake plan, and the leadership at the South Florida Water Management District generally changes with election cycles. So governors appoint governing board members, and we know from not too distant history that the previous governing board did not have environmental interests at heart. So we can have faith that today's governing board could take the environmental tack and prioritize what's right for the lake, the Everglades, and the estuaries. We just don't have an assurance that 4 years from now, when we still have this lake plan, that will be the case. And if we give the South Florida Water Management District explicit reliance to make these calls 1.5 feet above the water shortage management ban, we're concerned. So that is the gist of it right now. We are waiting for word from the Army Corps of Engineers on a decision on this request. And I think a lot is at stake here. So I'll stop there, Mark, and turn it over to you to add anything I didn't cover.
Thank you, Eve. I know we're kind of opening up the situation. We want to hear from the district and the Corps as well, but the idea is, this kind of came up, as Eve said, right at the last project delivery team meeting for the effort. And, it was concerning to us that there was this need to have this explicit kind of reliance on district water management district for guiding those operational decisions that govern how water moves out of the lake. So we're interested to really understand this, number one, but also to ask the Corps to seriously consider why this is being in place, and that what it really does operationally. For all the reasons you've mentioned, our concerns are kind of out there. So maybe I could ask either Drew or Jackie through Olympish if I wanted to bring in on the district perspective quickly, and then we can talk with others.
Thank you. I'd like to start in, and then of course we'll go to Executive Director Drew Bartlett and hopefully Colonel Booth from the Army Corps of Engineers. So it's great to be here today. For those of you who may not know me, I'm Jackie Thurlow Lippish, and I have one goal in my adult life, and it is to protect the St. Lucie River. I've been working for that since 2013, and that is my number one goal. I was appointed by Governor Ron DeSantis in 2019 to serve on the governing board, and it is a fantastic, challenging experience for me. And so today I'm going to try to balance those two parts of my life for you. And I feel good about it because, as usual, what I've done when I'm under pressure is I do my homework. And you know, I have to say that I received this letter from Miss Samples, and these were the questions posed to me for this Zoom today. Our primary questions at the moment are, what is the scientific basis for the request, the 1.5? Why was it proposed so late in the LOSUM process? Number 3, where did the idea originate? Number 4, is this in alignment with the governing board members' previously agreed upon policy of LOSUM? I want you to know that when I first got wind of the, I'm going to call it the 1.5, I too was taken aback. And I thought to myself, where is this coming from? And I have decided that this whole thing is a communication issue. It's a communication problem. And it's so awesome that we're all here together today because we will work through this communication issue. So in order to relight my memory, I sat and watched just the past couple of nights the meetings of the South Florida Water Management District for a timeline. So in April of 2021, we put together our statement. And this is what is kind of used as the Bible, so to speak, for where the governing board is coming from. And then on July 15th, we had another meeting, and you can go back and watch these meetings on the South Florida Water Management District website. And on July 15th, this was like, for me, almost the worst meeting I ever had to be in because, you know, Congressman Mast was there and all of you all were there, and the district was proposing 3.5. It was when we were dealing with LOSUM and we were, you know, with CC, and you guys remember all of that. So this was a long meeting. It was an emotional meeting, and 3.5 was put forth as a idea for the Army Corps to consider, but it was an issue for us with the St. Lucie because it caused more discharges through S308. So that's where my head was at that meeting. And you can see that when you look back on it. And at the end of that meeting, this is something I had kind of forgotten about. And I'm sorry, but you know, you remember, but there's so much stuff. And these were the implementation policy considerations building upon CC that the district approved for staff. I don't want to take too much time, but minimize discharges, promote environmentally beneficial flows, turn off flows to the St. Lucie and Calusi with algae. Anytime when considering regulatory and blooms are present, you can try not to dump. Defer to the South Florida water managers to decide and deliver rate to the Everglades for permit compliance, responsibilities, and health of the STAs. Okay, that's an important one. Let's read it again. Defer to South Florida water management managers to decide the delivery rate to the Everglades for permit compliance, water, responsibilities, and health of the STAs. And then when you go to the next two, it talks about recovery and also provide for water conservation measures when the lake is forecasted to enter into a dry period, which could lead to entering into the water shortage band. So communication. This was mentioned a long time ago. It was mentioned back on July 15th. I'm sorry, I was concentrating on 3.5 and how that was taking us down for the St. Lucie River. The next time this was mentioned was the next meeting, which was August 12th, when Drew Bartlett, our executive director, gave comments, executive director comments, and he totally speaks about these things. And you can see it when he's reading them off and talking about the Army Corps and water supply and the responsibilities of the district or whatever. The one thing that Drew Bartlett, and he and I have talked about this, so we're good with this, I think, did not ever say was 1.5. And I think it's that 1.5 that kind of got the ear of or ire of all of us, but it is not a new concept. And so at this time, I am going to let Mr. Bartlett say what he will of this. And for Mr. Bartlett's sake, the district and the old district and the history all the way back to 1915 with the Everglades Drainage District. Yes, permitting and water has been the whole purpose almost. But in this new world and with this new board, and hopefully forever, we are trying not to have the discharges into the St. Lucie River. Of course, the Caloosahatchee too, but that's not my area. So how do we balance these things? Why did you guys put a number on it when it had been mentioned so many times just as a concept? Thanks.
Hey, Jackie, thank you. And I appreciate you reliving all those board meetings. You're better than me. We've been talking about it, but we've never gotten the specifics, right? And I think as the Corps is contemplating recovery modes and conservation modes and all these different sort of policy angles on crafting their manual, it seemed like it was opportunity to put a proposal on the table, to say, because we never talked about when the Corps' responsibilities and the things that they find most important, when it comes to lake management, which is avoiding flooding issues with respect to the dike. There's other project purposes, but that's a big driver. We all have to admit that. When that becomes eased and the things that the district has to do, right, with respect to attempting to meet minimum flows and levels and the Caloosahatchee and the lake and the Everglades and delivering water supply and developing water supply for communities and society. All those things are very much rooted in our authorities that we have to take seriously. And so we have been having these discussions with the Corps, but we've never really been able to define it. And so what we offered was a proposal to define it within the 1.5 feet. The reason 1.5 feet was chosen is because the Corps is familiar with that, because it kind of tracks the D3 to D1 demarcation in the modeling. What I want to point out is, so that's where it came from. This is still a work in progress that the Corps is doing with Lake Okeechobee System Operating Manual. And I certainly expect public engagement as they proceed and deliberation, going forward. But it doesn't sort of change our desire to be able to own our responsibilities when our responsibilities are very important to us. So it was a proposal. I really appreciate Eve putting the graphic up because from my perspective and our board's perspective, that's a thing of beauty when it comes to flexibility of operations. It's a great big zone D. It allows us to put water to the Everglades and the Caloosahatchee at healthy levels all the way to water shortage management. We are absolutely not looking for another line on that graph. That graph looks very nice to us. So what we're just trying to do is figure out when the Corps will lean on us a little more when our responsibilities get more critical to us. And so it's something that we're certainly willing to continue to work on. Really appreciate the Corps being here to talk about this, but it is, as you know, and as this board and the district has been operating now, the relationship is good with the Corps. We've been doing a really good job at avoiding discharges and providing environmental deliveries. We're doing that currently. So it's something that we appreciate this coalition paying attention to and working on and engaging in this process, because it's important. It's important to have this right. So I appreciate it, Mark.
Thank you, Drew. I know that, you know, what we've all been following the PDT meetings right along and going right along. And this, as Eve had mentioned in the beginning, kind of came out of the blue to us, even though Jackie referred to the fact that there's always been discussion of the districts, you know, deferring to the district in a lot of the decision-making about Lake Okeechobee regulation schedules. So even in the current schedule and stuff, I know that the Corps always consults with and or defers to the district, and especially meeting the district's obligations for water supply or water shortage or those kind of issues. So when this kind of came up, it was like, well, that's always the case throughout all the operational zones. And so, you know, what we're looking at is saying, let's not make a different, you know, band in the schedule. Let's keep that operational zone all throughout zone D, if you will, down to the water shortage band, and let the district put into the operational guidance for LOSM how that works together with the district and to meet their responsibilities or to meet any kind of deferred schedule coming out. Because as we know, that the control of the 3 outlets south of the lake are district structures, and those are controlled by the district. The other 3 to the St. Lucie, Caloosahatchee, and the LA Canal are managed by the Corps. So operated by the Corps. So there has to be this kind of joint effort in consulting effort to defer in these operational guidance decisions. But you know, we're very careful to make sure that this defining that operational guidance and how those decisions are made in consultation with the district, you know, so that make sure that when the decision is made by the Corps through the LOSM process, that we actually can rely on that and not have to have it changed periodically based on different, you know, pressure criteria from different stuff. Colonel Booth, I know that you're gonna, you know, weigh in later on too, perhaps, but do you have any comments at this time for you want to talk?
Yeah, absolutely, Dr. Perry. Thank you very much. And to you and the members of the Rivers Coalition, thank you so much for having me here today. My first opportunity since I've been in command for about the last 4.5 months to meet with you all. And I apologize, it's taken so long for calendars to align, but I'm very happy to be here today. Always interesting when you get to come in and introduce yourself and have a good, serious, hard discussion, but happy to do it today. Hey, Dr. Perry, I think some of the way you summarize that is a very a good way of summarizing the process that we're going through right now. I appreciate Executive Director Bartlett, you know, explaining where they're coming from. As many of you all know, the Jacksonville District, on behalf of the federal government, operates Lake Okeechobee for a lot of federal purposes. One of those purposes that we're kind of talking about right now is water supply. And we have federal requirements, authorities, whatever you want to call them, that we need to operate and maintain. And we acknowledge it and certainly recognize and respect that the state gives South Florida Water Management District some of those same guardrails, requirements that they have to operate underneath. And those two things can exist mutually at the same time. And what we're really getting down to is how do we recognize that in the operational language and making sure that we're doing that open in the public view as well as the view of the PDT. As I recall, I've only been doing this, like I said, for a few months, but I know senior leaders from South Florida Water Management District have brought up the issue several times in group discussion and helping me learn and understand in individual conversations how we operate between us as I build the relationship personally with South Florida, but also for me to understand organizationally to organizationally. And I think that's just a great example of what we're doing with the LOSM process. This is just one issue that we have to discuss and bring everybody around to a mutual understanding of all the different competing interests to make sure that we get all the benefits out of Lake Okeechobee waters that we possibly can. And so I think the simple answer from our perspective is I think we can certainly get there. We're going to commit to continuing working with the district as well as all stakeholders as we communicate about this and make sure everybody understands it And as we continue to work and draft up that operational language, and I'll talk about that in my formal portion here in a little while, we'll certainly have multiple opportunities for everybody to comment on top of the January 12th meeting, as well as the listening session earlier this week. And so hopefully that helps from our perspective.
Yes, thank you, Colonel. Appreciate your input at this time. Eve, anything else we want to bring up here at LOSUM? I know we might bring it up again, City of Stewart, since they're on the PDT and so forth, and also through the Colonel when we talk about Lake Okeechobee. Is there other things for right now about the LOSUM process? Maybe asking, what's the schedule, Colonel? Can you just kind of give everybody the idea of where we are with the next PDT meeting, or what's the next step in this schedule, and considering this request by the district? Thanks.
Absolutely. Lieutenant Colonel Todd Polk's going to hopefully steer here and bring up a slide that I had. Just give me a couple seconds. What I'll just generally start to talk through it, and then Todd will bring up that background slide. Many of you are going to be familiar with the LOSUM timing, but ultimately many of you have been participating. We're currently doing the draft operational guidance to include, the draft water control plan. And that's where we're talking about this language and language about other issues that have been talked about throughout the PDT over the last many months. And we're going to schedule another PDT meeting to discuss that draft operational guidance sometime in mid-February. It will be the next major touch point. And then as you continue to go along, next slide there, Todd. And then if you continue to go along, you can look at the draft environmental impact statement and draft water control plan. Are scheduled to be complete in late April of this year. And then we transition into that public and kind of state and agency review. So the NEPA public comment period should occur between the May and June timeframe this year. And this is all by schedule. And so we expect if we maintain along that track that the final environmental impact statement should be done in October of this year. And that would allow us to move on to a record of decision, finalizing that record of decision in January of 2023. That goes up, that's actually beyond me. That record of decision authority sits up at the South Atlantic Division, or Brigadier General Kelly's level. So we've, like I said and talked about earlier, we've certainly got many more touch points as we continue to work through crafting that operational guidance, even before it gets to the normal point where most folks at the public level or state and agency would be used to engaging with a federal action. So we really appreciate all the stakeholders maintaining the pace with us and keeping us informed and helping us build the operational concepts that are kind of that backbone for LOSUM.
Yeah, thank you, Colonel. So what we're looking at on the schedule here is that over the next month or so, a couple months, that you're building up to the NEPA process and the EIS and all. We have opportunities where PDT is still meeting or still planning to consider, like this district request or any other request that comes forward in the operational guidance, formulation of the operational guidance. So what we'll do is if you can inform us, we'll pass it on to all our membership and everybody out in the community that when those meetings are coming up, when those considerations are coming up, and that way everybody can engage in the process as well. And you can get feedback from all the stakeholders, either separately like we've done here, or collectively as we send a letter to you or a request to you. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely. And we'll certainly stay committed to getting as much information out ahead of those meetings so we can have a really good informed discussion as we go into them. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel. Eve, I know we appreciate your input as well. And also thank you to Drew and to Jackie and others on the district for being here to give us that input as well. We may have continued discussion on this going forward, I'm sure. And what we want to do kind of next, if we want to wrap up this effort, if you have some questions or thoughts, concern, Daryl's monitoring the chat function and we can try to bring up interest in that. We do have next on Save the Manatee Club. I believe Pat Rose, representative, is on that. Jim, do you want to, Jim Moyer, are you on? Can you introduce that? And then we'll have more of an update from the district and then talk about seagrass mitigation. Jim? are you on? Or Pat Rose, are you on? Do you want to give us I guess the idea was to give an update from Pat Rose. He's the director of the Save the Manatee Club. And as many of you know, there's been what has been termed as basically an unusual mortality event this past year for manatees. So we want to focus on that and see, I think, what status is there. Patrick?
Yeah, good morning. I'll be fairly brief, and I'll leave for questions too, so that we want to cover areas we don't cover. But I think most folks know we ended last year with a record 1,101 manatees that were verified to have died. And of those, probably somewhere between 600 and 700 really were affected within the UME. And it's the first time really in the history of manatees in Florida where we had large scale malnutrition lead to starvation. So it was, I won't go into the all behind it, but it's a drastic failure over a decade or more in terms of not controlling water quality, nutrient pollution from both the leaking septic tanks into groundwater, improperly treated wastewater, and then combinations of fertilizers from both the domestic and agricultural fertilizers, which led to literally a series of phytoplankton blooms that shaded out and killed the seagrass. So that's just quickly. Of course, there's nothing new to what's also being added. That's in the northern Indian River Lagoon is where the major problems of that within the entire system. You all know better than anybody what's going on from the discharges from Okeechobee and so forth, and what all has to happen for the more southern regions. But while I'm trying to sort of pare this down to the most salient things right now, we're in the middle, though, of facing another round of major starvation. And the manatees that are dependent upon the warm water power plant in the Brevard County, Titusville area, many of those are coming in very malnourished. There was a benefit of the late winter, if you will. We had a much extended warm weather period, which actually gave the manatees a chance to find food in some of the tributaries and river systems and so forth too, where most of it was gone in the northern Indian River Lagoon. They were able to gain substance, including Lake Okeechobee. And in fact, I'll point out a dilemma we have right now with the repairs going on. And this is where I hope the Colonel is probably aware of this, but if not, we need to make sure he is. There were 20 or so manatees that were behind the lock when they closed it for repairs. And so it can't, as we understand it, cannot be opened at this point in time. There was a rescue effort mounted last week. They were able to capture 2 of the approximately 10 to 20 manatees at that point in time. It doesn't look like it's just a very tough place to conduct a rescue. So I understand the Corps is working to support to get some emergency heating, temporary heating, in order to keep those manatees from really expiring from cold stress. We've got severe cold weather, relatively speaking, coming in this weekend. And so that's an immediate issue. Some of the good news is that the efforts to supplemental feed manatees in the Brevard County area has started to actually work within the last week. So some of those animals, dozens of them, are able to now gain access to food there. It's too early to tell how successful that's going to be, but we project that there are going to be many more rescues needed. We're almost out of rescue space. So that's something we're desperately working on with all the manatee rescue and rehabilitation partners. At the same time, we've already seen accelerated mortality. It delayed. It wasn't nearly as bad early as it was last year, with the warmer weather really sort of mitigating that. But now we've had the cold. We're up to, I think, in the neighborhood of over 50 manatees that have died already in January. We're expecting probably a significant number, an increase as we move through this cold front, with that situation that manatees literally have to just choose between staying at the power plant, staying warm enough, or dying of cold stress if they try to venture out and find food. And their digestive systems, physiology really won't sustain them there. Maybe there's there's a lot to talk about later on in terms of what else is going on to try to deal with this in the long term. But I think at this point, I'll just stop and just, if there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer those.
Thank you, Colonel. Colonel, do you have your hand up or just waving?
Sure. No, I just wanted to respond very quickly,
Respond
sir.
to that.
Absolutely. We're fully aware this is a critical issue for the district. I've been aware of the issue since last Thursday. We are in the process of contracting that equipment and trying to get it out there as absolutely quick as we can and come up with a system to heat that water to the right levels to sustain, basically create that refugium for those animals until we get done with the repairs at the end of March. We certainly tried to time our repairs when we thought all the manatees would be past that lock. And it was just a little warmer, I think, this year, and they hadn't moved on. So we are reacting to it as absolutely quick as we can.
Yeah, I guess and certainly that's the word we're getting. It would be, I think, appropriate to look at, how the review took place in terms of making a determination as to whether the manatees were, had made their way out and so forth, but we don't need to get into that right now. But I think it is an important discussion to have sort of an after fact sort of assessment of that process.
Sure, absolutely. I appreciate the point, sir. Absolutely.
Any other questions or?
Yes, Jackie, I see your hand up.
Hi,
Literally.
thanks. Mr. Rose, could you please expound a little bit? Was it the FWC with the romaine lettuce that the manatees are actually starting to eat it now?
Yes, that's been set up and it's being presented so that manatees don't actually see who's or how they're getting the food and so forth. And they're doing it on the intake side of the power plant, separated from a large extended mole area where the discharge, in fact, we were there doing counts and other work on body condition assessments of the manatees last Thursday. There were actually 1,100 approximately manatees there. There's probably 100 or so that have at least ventured their way into the area on the intake side. There's some other elements of that going on. It's too early to tell whether that can really be available to the majority of the manatees that are really going to need it to help make it through this winter, so that then begin to spread out again and find food in other areas, including the various tributaries. Another thing I kind of wanted to take advantage of while the Colonel's on is that we've been trying to impress upon both the Corps, the water management districts, and the Fish and Wildlife Commission that any areas that manatees have access to where you would normally be doing your aquatic plant control, whether it's spraying or mechanical harvesting, if it's somewhere the manatees are getting access to, really look hard at whether or not that has to happen in those systems, especially connected to the IRL. Any of those tributaries and freshwater systems. It's really important to give them every chance they can to find the food where they can, because the amount of vegetation that's available left to them within the IRL itself is strained at best and nearly devoid in the northern end.
Thanks.
Yeah, that kind of brings up a point too. And Drew, you're on for the district. I know the district is involved in monitoring structures as well. So on the canal structures or anything like that, if you notice any congregations of manatee due to the unusual migration patterns or something, I'm sure your team is well aware of how to address those, right? So, yeah.
And I think,
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, please, I want to hear from you. Go ahead.
I was going to say, some might not understand too. Manatees tend to learn when these various structures are being operated, and they'll actually come and wait for the next opening of a structure. So when you have a major change in that system, it's really important to think about how the manatees are going to react to that. It's not a perfect one-to-one. They all, they're always going to respond one way or another, but they certainly do learn and adapt to those kind of patterns in terms of openings and closings and so forth.
So I know that my northernmost canal and structures in St. Lucie County, and is there, I'm not sure what the population is in St. Lucie County and whether there's a role we can play to maybe help in St. Lucie County. And of course we have Martin.
Well, as the Colonel talked about too, this winter, and I said earlier this, we had warm weather much longer. So manatees delayed their movements, especially since they're trying to find access to this freshwater vegetation where they whether they can, because of the low amount of seagrasses and so forth available to them. So virtually any of those freshwater creeks and rivers and systems, even the canals, are going to be habitat that they're going to be seeking out to find food in. That goes back again to the aquatic plant control issues as well. And there are good folks, of course, to coordinate with in the Fish and Wildlife Commission. We'd be, available to help wherever we can on those. In my past life, I was the first federal manatee recovery coordinator, and then went on to start manage all the state of Florida programs for manatees, marine mammals, and protected species. So have some background, and we worked over those years with the water management districts, with the Corps. A lot of really good things happened to make it better, but this sort of just highlights with the disruptions in the manatees distribution and seeking food and so forth. We just have to pay a little extra attention to those patterns and how those can be changing.
Thanks.
All right. I appreciate that. I will engage staff.
Sure. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Patrick, for being on. It's really key and important. And I know we have some updates on a meeting coming up here in Stewart back on March 24th that you might be working with, and we'll bring that up in a few minutes. So let's appreciate you being on. Let's move into, Jackie, do you want to do a water management district update now, or do you want to defer to our regular updates, which will come up next?
I'll just quickly say that there's going to be a groundbreaking for the C23, C24 reservoir in St. Lucie County within the coming weeks. And these are amazing times with all of the progress that is being made, and particularly in our area. Yes, we are still working for the EAA reservoir because that has to happen so that more water can flow south. But having C44 just celebrated, now C23 and C24, the infrastructure bill that came in from the federal government, from what I understand, will finish that project. Colonel, please tell me if I'm wrong there, but that is, I believe Sean Cooley's on the call too. I see him. I mean, to me, it's mind-boggling, what would you call it? Just the momentum that's going here. And yeah, we're all going to fight because that's what we do. But the bottom line is we are in a magical time of progress. And now we got to get the water quality right, so the poor manatees aren't dying, and we can live the lives we expect to live in Florida. Colonel, would you tell me if what's the deal with the money?
Ma'am, I think I'll be as brief as possible. We had an allocation of about 1.5 billion to the Army Corps of Engineers. 1.1 of that was made available for Everglades restoration. And with that amount, we could get to, and the Corps was focusing on fully completion of features or projects. So the projects that were funded are on the IDS in the time frame we were looking at. We just didn't have enough of a chunk of money to handle the EAA reservoir. That thing is multiple billions of dollars, and Congress's allocation just wasn't enough to get at that full project and get it fully funded in one chunk. And so the focus for the Corps was to find projects that we could get done and get complete with all the funds that the federal government allocated. And so that's the difference. Now we know we've got future budgets, and Everglades funding is getting reoccurring in the president's budget and what Congress is passing. And we have full confidence that we'll be able to continue the momentum to continue construction of the EAA. We've already got the first contract cut, and we're working towards getting the next contracts cut. And we have enough in the president's budget to keep those extra contracts going, and we don't have any concerns in the out years.
That's good. That's good. Thanks for that kind of update. I know that, yeah, C23, 24 groundbreaking that Jackie mentioned is February 18th, and the Corps sent out an invitation for that. If you're interested, we'll circulate that as well. But it's keeping these projects moving, and that momentum is really critical. And I think federal funding for those coming forward, and you applying it to those projects that need to be moving forward is critical. Just so that they're clear that everybody understood that it doesn't stop the EA project from moving forward. You're still working through the planning, getting all that done. The STAs are being constructed by the district and so forth. So it is still kind of moving forward. but
Hi,
it's just- yeah.
my name is Jennifer Smith. I'm the Chief of Staff at the South Florida Water Management District.
Yep.
And my Executive Director here, Chief Bartlett, wanted to get in touch with Stacy Miller, the Secretary.
Oh,
Stacy Miller.
You're not on mute.
Can we go ahead and mute you? Thank you, Jennifer. Thanks. Okay, well, I again appreciate the updates. We'll go again to that update on the third bullet down on the agenda. But now we want to discuss that seagrass mitigation bill that's being put forward through the House and the Senate. Daryl, can we share that? Can I share screen and show the letter? If you can allow me to share screen, appreciate it. So we sent a letter out to Representative Oberdorf. He was on the phone earlier. He did apologize for having a meeting basically on that came up, and he wrote into the chat function. Basically, he said, members of the Rivers Coalition and guests, I sincerely apologize, but I have a hearing at 11:30, and I will need to step away. I have received your letter and have heard your concerns about the proposed bill. As I hope you know, my door is always open and has been and will be open to you. I agree that water quality restoration must be paramount to the system restoration. I would also like the opportunity to meet with you at another time if possible. Again, I apologize, but I have to be at this 11:30 hearing and it is beyond his control. So that's what he wrote to us in the chat. I think it is advisable that we follow up this letter with more conversation to him, but also to the other representative who has a co-sponsor on this bill, and also track it as it goes through not only the House, but also the Senate in the state legislature, because there are some deep concerns here. So since we kind of proposed this letter and put it together, some of the board members and all, I'll go ahead and let Eve Samples or Jim or others who want to talk about this a bit. And I think everybody, if it got circulated enough to the members, Barbara, did we circulate this out to everybody? Barbara or Mickey? She's nodding yes, so I agree that. I think that's true. So this is the House Bill 349, and it is a big concern because there's been what they call a committee substitute for the House bill, and that is when they put it through committees in the House. Basically, they may substitute or add language or change language, and then it goes to the full House floor for a vote eventually, and it's also going through the Senate side. And the Senate side is basically Senate Bill 198 by Senator Rodriguez. So when you look down, that's basically where we also CC'd this letter to is Senator Anne Marie Rodriguez from District 39, and also Tyler Sororis, who's the other state representative co-sponsor. Eve or Daryl or Jim, do you have some other comments? We drafted this letter up, got it out.
Sure, I can provide a little more background. So what this bill would do is authorize the state of Florida to create seagrass mitigation banks, whereby developers could buy credits, allowing them to get permits for projects that damage seagrass. We have confirmed that this would make permits more readily available. And in fact, Representative Oberdorf said in a hearing in December that this would make it easier for developers to get permits for projects that destroy seagrass. So it's very clear that there's a concern here. This is the second year in a row Representative Oberdorf has advanced this bill. Last year in 2021, it did not get any traction. And in fact, in 2008, a similar bill was filed and vetoed by Charlie Crist. And we contend that given the unusual mortality event of manatees, which rely on seagrass for their food, that there's even more reason now to be concerned about this proposal. So that's why the Rivers Coalition Board of Directors sent a letter to Representative Overdorf. The Florida Keys Fishing Guides Association also opposes this bill. They've sent a letter to Senator Rodriguez, who represents the Florida Keys area. And it's not just us environmentalists that are concerned about it either. In fact, Representative Randy Fine up in Brevard County was very vocally opposed to the bill and published an op-ed about it in Florida Today, the newspaper, in recent weeks. So we certainly hope that Representative Overdorf withdraws this bill. I'm sorry he's not here to have an exchange with us about it today. And I'll just end by saying one thing, the leading seagrass expert in the state, he's an FIU research scientist, James Forquarian. He says this bill's bad for many reasons. It is specifically looking to make it easier for people to build docks that damage seagrass, would surely lead to the loss of seagrass by allowing developers to plant it in mitigation banks that may work, but probably won't. It's very hard to replant seagrass and get it to thrive because it's dependent on good water quality. So that's why we're opposed. And thank you to the coalition and all the members for being aware of this.
Thank you, Eve. Yes, as we saw this bill coming through, which it had been tried before, we know that any kind of harm that is happening to seagrass because of mitigation banking or otherwise is not good for the estuary. We need to hang on to every bit of seagrass we can and protect it as much as we can. And at the same time, try to restore that habitat through the planting efforts and other nursery efforts like we do here at Florida Oceanographic and other places in order to restore the seagrass. But just everybody knows, it sounds like banking's a good thing, but it's not really when mitigation has been tried and used before, and it's not very successful a lot of times either. And that's the problem that we have with particularly this bill and others. We need to protect every bit of seagrass we have in the lagoon and not allow it to be permitted away and destroyed and then hope it'll be banked somewhere else and get credit somewhere else. So that's essentially that behind there. There's going to be a lot of follow-up to this through our board and others. I noticed that Diane Goldberg and others have gotten direct responses from Representative Overdorf and others. So we need to kind of continue to do that as we move forward. Any other thoughts on this? And we're going to be tracking it very carefully and again asking for them to back off of this bill as it moves forward. Let's get into the Martin County updates, and then we'll go back to City of Stewart, talk about Little Losum again, and move on down through our updates from government agencies. Martin County, is Diane Hughes on, or John Mayle or others? Diane? You want to give us a quick update? Anybody from Martin County? I didn't think I saw anyone there. Ben Hogarth from City of Stewart, are you on? I noticed Commissioner Matheson and Commissioner Eula Clark's on and others.
Yeah. Good morning, Mark and everyone. I'm actually going to hand over the mic in a second to now Mayor Matheson. Former Vice Mayor, now Mayor. We've had to switch, so I'll hand that over to him in a moment, just so Mayor Matheson can speak about some of the things that we've been doing recently. Obviously, we're also focusing on legislation at this time, looking at some of these bills, and we might have some positions soon on those coming up. But since we have some Army Corps staff, and I know the Lieutenant Colonel is still on, it'd probably be good just to have kind of just a basic staff position stated on the call, and something we'll probably follow up with in writing. We heard kind of that proposal put forth by the district, the water district, I mean, and our first reaction was more inquisitive and curious as to what that would look like, and the more we started to look at it, the more we didn't like the the proposal in itself and what that could mean. And it's important to say that that's not meant to be an indictment of any kind against the district or, you know, any kind of loss of confidence in the district to make decisions. It's not meant to be that. What our concern would primarily be based on is really just how the federal government and the state government interact in all the different agencies and decision making. And, you know, from a legal perspective as well, it gets into what, you know, what's considered to be kind of an arbitrary decision making process. Who gets to determine that? Who the locals get to look at. So for our position, it's just good to know that we have concern about breaking, you know, decades of kind of, you know, the status quo of how staff and decision makers and policymakers go through that process. So just wanted to state that on the call so that, you know, Army Corps staff understand kind of where we're coming from, and we'll probably follow that up with writing in more detail and more clarity. But that's it for now. We are looking at some resolutions coming up for the legislature for the current session, and without giving anything away, I'll probably just hand it over to Mayor Matheson to speak on more of the policy stuff.
Hi guys, thank you, Ben, and you know, Ben and I have had a lot of conversations on the district's proposal of what's kind of developed at the end of LOSUM at the end of last year and now, and you know, Eve touched on it in her introduction, and the big concern for the city of Stuart, you know, is dry season lake heights. History has shown us have a direct correlation to emergency regulatory releases and flood control, which the Corps is in charge of. So, you know, when you're talking about water supply and those rights and focusing the effort on the district having full control, here in the city of Stuart, in our minds, you know, those lake heights in that dry season have that direct reflection on the burden we might bear, you know, when the season changes and we're dealing with the rainy season. So, you know, our city staff will discuss this more and then, you know, put a position in writing. But when I look at science, you know, the more voices and the more data out there and open discussion, the better. And so we're real hesitant to want to just say in any portion to give any one agency, you know, more control at a different position than others, because what you do in one season definitely reflects how the lake is going to be, you know, 6 months down the line. And the residents of Stuart know that all too well. You know, City of Stuart hasn't taken any formal position on the bills, and that would be something we would have to discuss as a commission coming up. I will say I proudly sit on the board of the Indian River Keepers, and we have taken a position, and I'll leave it at that. And then I'd like to mention something we did at City of Stuart's last meeting, where we voted for the city to apply for a matching grant from the Indian River Lagoon Council to do a buffered shoreline and living shoreline just downtown of our hospital. There's a little pocket park at the end of Illinois Avenue, and there's a baffle box there with an outfall into the St. Lucie River. Hopefully we will receive that matching grant, and the city will be working with University of Florida IFAS Extension to do a living shoreline and a buffered shoreline there to remove more nitrogen, phosphorus flowing into the waterways there. And I think I noticed Vincent Encomio is on the line. He may be able to talk more about that planting project, but hopefully we'll receive the grant and move forward with that. Some of those little water quality projects that the city can do, you know, hopefully get us a step further to being able to get behind fully replanting seagrass and and helping with that, knowing that it will eventually have the water quality to sustain it. And Mark, I'll
Thank
turn
you.
it back over to you. Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to share my thoughts.
Yeah, appreciate all the city of Stewart's involvement, not only on PDT and LOSUM, but also all the other projects and efforts city of Stewart does. And congratulations on mayor and all the city commissioners that are working together to help our river and our river system. Jackie, I see your hand up. Would you like to say? Jackie, go ahead.
That's awesome, Mayor, that you're doing a living shoreline. Thank you so much. And I meant to do this when we were in Martin County, since they're not here. The projects help water. Land helps water. It's as the land is the water. And I wanted Drew Bartlett to briefly speak about Barbie Ranch and what you've been doing for Martin County, because this has been a Herculean effort.
Thank you. So Barbie Ranch is about a 2,000 acre ranch that is just on the north side of the C-44 STA, and it's within the Indian River Lagoon's natural lands footprint for IRL South under SERP. And so we have partnered with Martin County to put forward a Florida Forever project for consideration at the state to acquire that land, both for conservation purposes, wildlife corridor purposes, water purposes, hydrologic restoration, and SERP. It's a win-win-win-win project for the Indian River Lagoon and the St. Lucie estuary and the wildlife around that area. I've had great conversations with the Secretary at DEP and the Deputy Secretary, and there's a lot of support and enthusiasm around this project. It was overwhelmingly approved at the first ARC meeting. There's a lot of process to go, but there's a lot of enthusiasm. It's a great piece of property. I've been out there, and I just have this huge amount of confidence that at some point it will be part of the IRL natural lands footprint and in our ownership. And so, but it's got process to go. So stay tuned and keep advocating for this one. It's an incredible piece of property.
Kind of puts us right in line there with the Water Management District update. Before we get to that, I know you had, thank you, Eve, for putting in the chat function. You put in the link to the op-ed from Representative Fine on that seagrass bill. And also I see people that if you go over to the bottom of your screen over to the right-hand side, you'll see reactions. And if you put reactions there, you can raise your hand function. And I see that Greg Braun has his hand raised. So Greg, do you have a
Yeah, just briefly
question or
want to
comment?
say thank you to Mayor Matheson for his comments about the Illinois Avenue Park. I've been to that site, and indeed it's very small, but we're hopeful that that project will not only be successful, but be a template for a much larger area of the city's waterfront. So thank you, Commissioner Matheson and the City of Stewart Councilman.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Greg, for that comment. There's a lot of good efforts. We at Florida Oceanographic have a couple of projects that we're working on with property owners along the waterfront for living shorelines, including seagrass and oyster reefs, combined with cordgrass and other grasses that are emergent grasses. So it's a really good program, and I applaud the City of Stewart for definitely stepping in there. All right, Jackie, through a little lippish, can we move on to the Water Management District update? And
Sure,
thanks
I'm
again
here.
for Drew Bartlett being here and a lot of the staff of the district. Appreciate it.
I'm sure you've had enough of me. But I think it's important to note that the next South Florida Water Management meeting will be Thursday, February 10th, and it will be in West Palm Beach. So I hope everyone will come, and we will work out all of this stuff. We will work out the 1.5. We will work out the EAA. But we just have to keep fighting. We just have to keep talking. We just have to keep our interest up. So thank you so much. And I'm here for whatever anybody wants to say. You can call me. Thanks.
Thank you, Jackie. It is a good governing board, and they have great meetings, and I'm glad They didn't have one in January because everybody was gathering up at the Everglades Coalition Conference, which was held down the Keys. We had 213 in-person participants and about 111 of virtual participants. All the governing board members were there. It was and other staff members from the district and the Corps and Corps of Engineers, and big representation. And that kind of communication is exactly what Jackie is talking about, that we need to have, not just at an annual conference, but more also during the month-to-month meetings, as well as interim times like this. So appreciate that time. We're going to talk a little more about LOSUM during the next bullet, which is about state and federal agencies. Since we do have the Corps of Engineers on, I know Colonel Booth had to step away as he had other obligation, but Lieutenant Colonel Polk or Ava, Liz, or anyone else from the Kim Taplin or anybody from the Corps.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Hey, thank you, Mark, and thank you, Dr. Perry, and everyone. Of course, yes, Colonel Booth was extremely excited to join us today. Unfortunately, he did have to step away. There's a retirement ceremony going on, and those are things we try not to miss. I think the biggest thing, after all, I'm going to share the operational slide again real fast. I think a lot of y'all have seen this kind of cartoon sketch many times, but a couple of things I'll just show real quick. As you can see, over the past several years now, from 2018 there, those high point peaks, to when we were staring down the barrel of Dorian, and into last year with Ada. You see those lake heights. Right now we're sitting right at 15 feet. I think we'll see the continued recession. It's been a bit slow. I think we'll see some pickup of the recession rate in Lake Okeechobee. Right now we are definitely, because of the later once the dry season coming on a little bit later, we are finalizing our dry season strategy. And then as far as operationally, we've been releasing up to 2,000 to the West Coast there with the Caloosahatchee side, and then doing our best to keep it at zero out of the S80. So we did have to release just a little bit of water the other day after that amount of rain out of the S80. But primarily because of what we're doing, obviously, that we're filling up the C44 right now reservoir, which is fantastic, right? We've been all waiting for this, but we hit those 5-foot increments. So we're on a pause now for about the next 3 or so weeks. So we aren't able to put any more water in there right now, which will be, and that's the whole intent, is to accept that basin runoff on the C44 reservoir. But for right now, we're letting it settle, take monitoring. This is probably the most dangerous time, if you would, or most tenuous time of any time we're filling up a reservoir in any kind of dammed a retention area like that. So we just got to take it very slowly. But again, the intent is not to release. Appreciate you quickly just touch on the manatee situation. Definitely, like you said, we are in track. We are well aware it is a bit unfortunate just some of the timing of things, but we will have the heating. We are going to get the heaters down there to help out those manatees, and looking forward to get that situation as best under control as we can very soon. I think LOSUM, much like Jackie said there, my therapist said, it's been a communication. We stay in constant communication with the district and everyone. I think that right now, we'll look to see how the modeling shakes out. Like we listen to everyone else, see where we're at with this and move forward. Certainly acknowledging Mr. Hogarth. Yeah, to your point, we always maintain on the federal level, it is still our responsibility, and that's nothing that will ever or change how we operate the lake. So just a quick update there for everything. There's a lot of other things out there, but don't want to take too much more of our time.
Thank you, Colonel. Anyone from FDP or FWC? I did want to recognize, I think Gil Smart had a question about LOSUM or something to point about LOSUM. Gil?
I did, and if Drew Bartlett's still on, I guess I would direct this question to him.
I'm here.
Okay, so on this 1.5-foot buffer, would the goal of this be to never reach the water shortage management band?
I can't set goals right now. I don't think that's possible. In a dream world, I would never reach the water shortage management band, but that is a dream world, because once you're in the water shortage management band, you're cutting back regardless, right? You're cutting back environment, people, everything. If we can operate the lake now with our new flexibility and a repaired Hoover dike to make sure that we can keep ecosystems and ecosystems healthy and water supply whole, that's an ideal world. So, as we think about operations when we're in a drier climate, our goal would be to, try to take care of the environment and people throughout the entire dry season, right? I mean, so that is a goal. But once we don't know what the decisions are until we get there, and then I would anticipate a good public discussion about those decisions as well.
Yeah, I would as well. I mean, I'm just trying to wrap my head around. My question would be, obviously there's obvious benefits to water supply if in fact, we have this 1.5 foot buffer zone wherein the state, the district can make some decisions as to how we're going to proceed. I'm wondering if there's any benefit whatsoever to sort of the other stakeholders. Is there any benefit to the Everglades? Is there any benefit to the Caloosahatchee and or the St. Lucie? Is there any benefit to the lake ecology itself if there was this 1.5 foot buffer zone? Or would the benefits actually really be realized solely by water supply?
So I don't think we would know what the Corps would do, right? We know what they modeled, which I'm not sure that provided a lot of environmental benefits in that area. So we do advocate not using the model as the operational criteria, that we keep the 0 to 2,000 and water going to the Everglades all the way to water shortage management. And so, our sort of interest is really rooted in our statutory responsibilities, which includes minimum flows and levels, which includes ecosystem restoration, right? So what this board has been consistent on, and certainly where I've been coming from, is that balance as we get to it, right? So, that's the best I can do because I can't predict the future.
Okay, thank
you, Drew. Thank you for answering those. And again, keeping this conversation going is really important. We did have, before we leave agencies, a question that was saying, can the Corps of Engineers use the 1.2 billion to monitor pollution runoff, MAG, and find them to encourage to stop pollution, since DEP, FDEP hasn't been enough to stop? And just to answer that briefly, I think the 1.2 billion that Colonel mentioned is pretty much project oriented to large regional projects and the comprehensive Everglades restoration planning. Where it comes down to stopping the pollution and monitoring pollution is left to the triad, as Jackie Thurlow-Lippisch reminds us always. There are the three agencies: the Florida DEP, Department of Environmental Protection, the FDACS, Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, and of course the South Florida Water Management District. Those three agencies are in charge of putting together and implementing the Northern Everglades and Estuaries Protection Plan. And that's what we need to keep bringing up. They're in charge of that water quality and the pollution runoff in all of the watersheds. And that's where we need to keep bringing that up, is to those three agencies to come together and implement that. So, but I thank the Corps for at least using the 1.2 billion wisely. And of course, they'll do that, I'm sure, to get these projects moving forward. So
Mark,
let's move. Yes.
May I offer some comments here?
This is Ava?
Yes, it's Ava from the Corps.
The Corps of Engineers.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Comment.
It's great to see all of you. Happy to join my home team here. So wanted to offer a little bit of thoughts about what can you expect from the Corps, right? I know Drew was talking, he wouldn't be sure what we would do. So that won't be a mystery, right? We're all, as we've been sharing together for the last several years in LOSM, we'll tell you what we're thinking, and then we'll tell you what we're going to do. And we'll also be offering our language in draft form in our next PDT in bite-sized pieces, so we can all learn together. And then you'll see the full plan in April. You'll be able to have comments, and then you'll see the final. So that's kind of the big picture answer. We can look at also what we're doing right now, right? In LORS, in the current schedule, it says send 650 the Water Management District and the Corps assess conditions together with the scientists of the Everglades and say, hey, the Caloosahatchee can take more. The Water Management District made a recommendation for 2,000, and that's what the Corps is releasing. So there are a lot of really good contexts to help us understand what to expect. We have a really good framework and a model run that we've identified. And I think specific to Gil's question, I think that what we will want to do is to stay within the philosophy of LOSM, being consistent with that philosophy, right? And what that philosophy said was that within Zone D, we want to think about benefits. And we know that if we're in water shortage, we can't provide as many benefits. And so it isn't that we'll operate the lake to never have a shortage because we can't control climate, but we can be careful when we get closer in collaboration with the Water Management District to protect and preserve the opportunity to send water south and west as long as we can, all the way down, while also providing for water supply. That's the philosophy of LOSM, right? That's how it's different from LORS. And so that's what we want to make sure we protect. And I know that's big picture, but I did want to offer our thoughts about that. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Ava. And I especially like to comment that even during LORS 2008, the schedule right now, that you have that operational flexibility to be able to meet the minimum flow and level needs that are over in the West Coast and be able to do that in cooperation and coordination with the district. Appreciate that very much. I don't see Paul Gray from Audubon on us. He's usually on the call. He may have had other obligations, but he usually reports on the lake and the lake health and how things are doing. And then lastly, we have state and federal legislation. Eve Samples, you're kind of on the agenda to bring us up on any of that, besides perhaps the seagrass mitigation bill that's going forward. Eve?
Sure. I'm going to throw a lifeline to our newest board member, Gil Smart on the Rivers Coalition, who has been tracking legislation closely. The Seagrass Mitigations Bank bill is one of the two biggest that we're tracking. And Gil, if you're willing and able, I was hoping you would just fill everyone in on the other one, which is the rate tailoring of fertilizer application. That's a really important one to know about.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Eve. Yeah, we the other organization I work with, Vote Water, actually put out a thing on this last week. So Senate Bill 1000, there's a companion bill, I believe it's House Bill 1249, sponsored by the Senate bill, sponsored by Senator Ben Albritton. And it's about what's being termed rate tailoring, which essentially means that if you're a farmer, there are regulations governing how much fertilizer you can use on your land. Obviously, the state of Florida has a vested interest in that, trying to make sure that runoff from that fertilizer doesn't make it into our estuaries, or more so than it already does, because it's already such a huge problem. But anyway, it's sort of a one-size-fits-all regulation. What Albritton's bill would do, if passed, it would allow agricultural operators to hire, quote unquote, certified professionals to come in and recommend a sort of a custom fertilizer application rate for whatever they're producing. As we understand it, this is aimed primarily at the citrus industry. Albritton himself is a citrus farmer. And if you saw the stories this past week, actually Florida's citrus crop this year is projected to be the lowest it's been since World War II. This is due to greening as well as other factors. I'm sure this weekend's deep freeze isn't going to help. And so the idea is to help, Albritton's idea is to help citrus farmers, maximize yield. And to do that, you may need more fertilizer. Of course, the problem with that is the more fertilizer you put on these lands, the more likely it is to run off. Well, the answer to that in the bill would be to require all farmers who engage in or who hire someone to recommend rate tailoring, that they would have to enroll in the state's BMPs, Best Management Practices Program, in order, to avail themselves of this benefit. The problem with that, as we probably know, is BMPs aren't working. Okay, and it would also extend the presumption of compliance to these farmers who are involved in this, which means that as long as they adopt the state's BMP regulations, as long as they adopt these practices, there'll be no testing. The state will not come in and say, well, we're going to see if you're actually achieving these reductions. That doesn't happen under the state's regulations. They extend the presumption of compliance to farmers. And so there's basically one outcome possible for as far as our waterways are concerned. There's basically only one outcome that's possible if this legislation passes, and it's more nutrients in the water. We're opposing it on that basis, and it's on the radar screen of a number of other organizations around the state. It's moving though. The Senate bill has already gone through its first 2 committee stops and is in its 3rd. The House bill has not yet had any hearings, but that's only because it didn't get proposed until January 11th. And, as we understand it, that's probably going to move fairly quickly too. This seems to be one of Albritton's priorities. So if folks out there are interested in this topic, please feel free to contact me. I can fill you in. I can forward along the piece that we sent to our Vote Water members last week. It's bad news, folks. This bill's pretty bad news. So.
Thank you, Gil. And in case anyone missed it, TC Palm Treasure Coast newspapers published a really informative series of stories about why BMPs and BMAPs are failing us now in terms of limiting pollution, particularly in the Lake Okeechobee Basin. So in light of the years of that we've endured and the resulting toxic algae blooms from that nutrient pollution, we see no good reason to liberalize rules that govern fertilizer application in the state of Florida. So that's the big one. We have more details on our website, everglades.org, if people want to read about other bills.
Thank you, Eva. No, and thank you for any organization and group that's monitoring or tracking some of the legislation that's going before the state legislature right now. As we know, the session will end in March. There's only a 60-day session. So they're really putting forward a lot of legislation to be through committees, and then it's going to come to the floor. So monitoring these are really important. I know that there were other bills like Senate Bill 832 for the Blue-Green Algae Task Force recommendations that are not moving, and other bills to BMP enforcement through FDACS, Senate Bill 904, which is not moving either. So there are bills that get introduced and then they don't go anywhere, basically. And then there are that start moving through everything to come to a vote at the end of the session. So we really have to keep monitoring it. I appreciate Gil and even any other organization being able to monitor that, and let's communicate that around soon, because these are timely issues that move forward. Moving into River Coalition updates. So we
Mark, I think Jackie had a question. I'm sorry to interrupt.
I'm sorry. I didn't see that. Jackie, go ahead. Yep.
I noticed my brother has a question for Drew Bartlett about 1.5. Yeah. And also, I just learned
the chat
like 2 days ago.
That's Todd Weissing, not me.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry.
Lots of Todds in the meetings.
Todd. Mr. Albritton is going to be president of the Senate in 2024. So get ready, okay? We should be working as hard as possible. He's, it's just he's an ag man, and that's okay. You're allowed to be an ag man, but we know the power of the Senate president. Think of what Joe Negron did for the St. Lucie River. So it's important when you're looking at these bills too, to see who the people are that are putting forward. How much status do they have? He has a lot of status. Just mentioning it.
No, thanks for bringing that up, Jackie. It is about who the leadership is and what's going on and what's going to be presented at the final hour of all of this. So let's keep all that in mind and keep that tracking as we go forward. Rivers Coalition updates. River Kids, I think Nick Mader's on, and Speakers Bureau. Nick, you have also a special announcement about the upcoming manatee program.
Yes. First of all, I'd like to mention that I have a lot of River Kids workbooks. If anybody's interested, I have boxes and boxes in my garage. I will deliver them wherever anybody would like. So if you'd like some, please contact me, and I'll put my number up on the screen. Also, at March 24th, Thursday, at the Lyric Theater, we have a collaboration going on. And graciously, Executive Director of Save the Manatee Club, Patrick Rose, has agreed to be our star, along with Eve Samples will be moderating. And the River Kids will be introducing, and this is all put on by the Environmental Studies Center. It is our one lecture for the year, our lecture series, and Kai Fontaine of Lyric Theater has been really wonderful to work with. So this will be, I think, an important event for our community to let them know what is going on with our manatees here in the local area, as well as the whole IRL and the UME going on. So thank you so much to Patrick Rose. And also the River Kids hopefully will be doing another event here in the next few weeks, bringing light to the manatee crisis in our area. And if anybody has any questions for me, please feel free to contact me. Thank you.
Great. Todd Weissing for Speakers Bureau update. Any updates?
Good. Yeah, sure. Can you hear me?
Yep, absolutely.
Good. Well, obviously COVID has affected the Speakers Bureau, and please know for those of you that could or would like to have one of our speakers come and join you for a meeting, that we not only meet outdoors, we also have via Zoom and WebEx. So there is a lot going on. If you have a meeting, you'd like to have an update on everything that's happening with Rivers Coalition, please go to our website, scroll down, click request a speaker, and we are booking engagements well out in the future. So if you have an opportunity for us to come and visit, we'd love to join you. Thanks, Mark.
All right, we're getting to local issues, and I see in the chat a comment by Greg Braun on the Loxalucy Headwaters project is moving forward. Acquisitions, I appreciate Representative Snyder and Senator Harrell sponsoring legislation for appropriation in that project. We had an update on the Loxalucy Headwaters project from Greg, and I'm sure we want to stay tuned to what's going on there. If I could, Daryl, share my screen, I appreciate it. I could kind of give you that update real quick.
Go ahead, Mark.
Okay. Yep. Okay. Yeah, I'm trying, it doesn't let me. So screen share. Okay.
Right now. There you go.
Okay. There we go. That's kind of working. So as Eve Samples and others, this is that kind of overview of what's going on right now. These are daily averages that are happening within the flows. The lake's at 15.07. There's no flows coming to the east through S308 to S80, but there is about 1,300 CFS going to the Caloosahatchee and almost 2,000 out S79, which is good for that. Again, no flows going south at this point in time of that either. I want to bring up, we just put out an annual report for 2021 on the water quality update that we do. We're real excited about kind of composite of our citizens water quality monitoring program that's been going on since the early 90s. We have the water quality trends that are listed here. What I'm going to do is post this over to the Rivers Coalition website so they could put it out there. But basically, here's kind of some of the weekly means of the discharges and the water quality grade and the flows into the estuary. It's really telling that, when we get too much flow, particularly discharges, we see that inflow, that water quality drops down quite a bit. So these are thank you to all these citizen scientists who are out there weekly monitoring water quality, and we certainly appreciate that activity going on there. The water quality does look pretty good in our area currently, but we are hoping to, kind of see that of course that happens during this time of year when we don't have any freshwater inflows except for local rainfall, which does occur and gives a chance for the estuary to recover in that situation. So looking down to seagrass update, Todd, did you have a slide or something you want to share?
Yeah, I have a couple of things to walk through real quick. We have some time. Is that coming up? You all can see that?
Yeah, all right.
Yep. It looks a little darker on the Zoom share. This is a satellite image of Sailfish Flats on the 15th, just a couple of days ago. So,
Okay.
you know, a lot of blue seawater in there looking clear. This was the photo that I think I shared probably at our last meeting. You can see a little more in there, but we talked about how people had been out there and that seemed to be the algae on the sand. So maybe it's just there's less algae on the sand now and it's more just sand. Just to back all the way up, that's the reference kind of point from back in 2007. So drastic changes since then. I did get out there in December. This was the pictures I was sending my sister Jackie. This is what the Thurlow kids do on weekends, send pictures of each other, you know, for the grass flats. And of course, I don't know what this is. So Mark, maybe you can tell us what kind of grass we're looking at here. But you know, it's kind of like, hey, we found something. So this was, you know, in next to this little island right here. And then there was some. I went back to check in here, and there was some grass in there too. So just little sprigs of grass out there, but blue water.
Yeah, the broad feathery stuff you see is actually a Caulerpa mexicana. It's a, and there's, but that's Holophila. That's a paddle grass. It's a type of seagrass right there. The thin blades again, or the shoal grass, that thick blade right there, that thick plant is actually a Caulerpa. It's a plant that grows underwater and submerged like that. Whereas this little paddle blades are called Holophila. And there you see a bunch of Holophila starting to come back. This is exactly what I'm seeing too out there on the seagrass flats. Again, this is nowhere near as thick as it used to be many years back. It used to be very, very thick, but you can see the white rhizomes even above there in this particular hole, and some of the other grasses around it. Again, the very thin blades are the shoal grass. And if they're thick and round blades, long blades, that's the manatee grass. But manatees will eat any seagrass. They're herbivores, and so they'll eat a lot of vegetation. They eat a lot of it every day. But the more we can reestablish this and allow the water quality to be good, we'll be better off. So thanks, Todd.
Yeah. So like you were saying, the lake's still holding at 1507 right now as we speak. But unlike last night at midnight when they did, you know, that map is kind of set at midnight, showing no flows out of S308. You can tell right now it is open again. So 603 CFS coming through into the C44 basin right now. Lieutenant Colonel Polk might be able to comment. He said that they're not filling up the C44 right now, that they're kind of at a hold. So I guess this is for local irrigation. A little power tip: if you're on my website and you click on these things, it'll take you directly to the Army Corps graph, so you can see where they just opened it up today. But these are the pulses that were coming in before, and then we did have a little pulse in the rainstorm coming out of S80 into the St. Lucie River. And so I kind of just put this up to remind myself that here's the C44 reservoir that we're talking about, and maybe I'll do some satellite imagery to show it filling up now, because it'll be interesting. And Lieutenant Colonel Polk did make the comment that these are the scary times when you're filling up a reservoir. Right here off towards Lake Okeechobee, this is the FPL reservoir. And in 1979, not long after they filled that up, it broke right here. And you can actually kind of still see the scar. That's the scar from that thing broke. And it was a disaster. It took a train off the train tracks. 15,000, I think, CFS came through S80.
The canal, yes. Yeah.
I did a video on that. Jackie blogged on it. It's a very interesting thing. And then engineers asked me for my video so they could show it at engineering conferences. But real quick on the lake, just looking at the satellite imagery, I mean, it's clear as it should be at this time of year. You can't probably see it on the Zoom meeting, but there's like a little haze on there. And in my experience, that little haze is kind of the algae kind of down on the column, you know, buffered down by the cold. When you look at the infrared, you can see it a little more, but every once in a while you look at a different band, and maybe there's a scientist on here who can tell us what it is, but this is the normalized difference water index that shows differences in the water. So that's that haze you can see, but when you look at it at a different wavelength, you know, I don't know what that is, but maybe someone could tell us.
It's not an algae bloom, that's for sure.
No, but it's a difference in the water column. So there's something down there.
Well, thanks, Todd, for those updates on the satellite imagery. And as Greg pointed out, there might be Holophila johnsoni instead of Holophila discipens, which is, they're two different paddle grasses, and the Holophila johnsoni is a threatened species. So again, that's a protected species of seagrass we need to be aware of in Indian River.
And I did have a quick
yeah.
question about the C-44 like operation. So
Okay.
like, you know, if we're filling up the C-44 reservoir right now, I mean, we're obviously, I wouldn't think we would fill it up all the way eventually, because then it just is storage for irrigation. I mean, it's going to be at a level where it always has a capacity to absorb that C-44 basin water in the future, so that we don't have to open up S80. And then the question would be, if S308 is open, if the gate's open and we're filling C-44, well, then we're filling it with lake water. And is it for lake water or basin water or both, or how does that operate?
It's designed for the basin runoffs, right? That's the actual design. But obviously, as we kind of hit this drier season, you know, we got to get the water where we can. So we did have to release some out of 308, you know, recently to get more water to pull in there, because it can pull in about 1,100 CFS is what those pumps will do when all four of those are kicked on, pulling into the reservoir itself. But again, it's to hold. We're trying to hold to that 15-foot range, and then that is to go into the STA and then back into the canal.
But I guess the scenario would be is if we're in a situation where the lake's high and we have to discharge through 308 and S80 to the St. Lucie River, and C-44 reservoir has capacity, would we turn those pumps on to reduce the discharges, or is it really going to still be held for C-44 basin?
It's still for the basin, sir. It is primarily for the basin, and that's yes, yeah. So,
if I may,
please, Ava.
Some information. I know that we're both the Water Management District and us are on, and so Mr. Thurlow, I just wanted to let you know that when there is opportunity. First, let's just agree that we're filling the reservoir to test it, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And so during the operational testing period, the Corps retains the reservoir, so to speak, because it's still considered construction, but we're together with the Water Management District because eventually we transfer it to them for long-term operations, right? So we're in this kind of transition period right now. We're testing it together, we're learning, and we do it in increments, so that then we do want to see it full, and we want to see the data for it full. So that's right now.
Yeah. So that's my question. Yeah. So in this testing phase, you all are going to fill it up all the way to kind of put it to the test?
We are. And so I think John might still be on. So I want to make sure that if I misspeak that he corrects me, Mr. Mitnick, but so we're going to fill it in 5-foot increments all the way up to 15, right? We need to test it. We need to see the data. We need to make sure the dam is all good.
Yeah.
Right.
So after the testing's over, then where would it normally be held in a you know, time of year like this, like fairly low or?
Right. So it'll be seasonal. It won't, it's not going to have these predetermined levels. John, I could see you about to go off mute. I could see him jumping in.
Go ahead, John.
Go ahead.
Yeah, if I can. This is John Mitnick with the Water Management District. Ava is correct. Right now, going through that operational testing, the reservoir will go through a filling process in 5-foot increments until it is completely full. After each 5-foot increment, there's a hold period where all the testing and evaluation and data collection, as she referenced, gets conducted to make sure that the reservoir is performing as it was envisioned and designed. But once that is all completed, sometime later this year, then we would anticipate it being transferred over for full operations. If you recall, for the course of, I think, the past year, the Corps of Engineers has gone through a public process to develop that draft project or preliminary project operating manual for the reservoir itself. So if folks are interested in that document, I encourage you to reach out to the Corps and they can provide that, which describes those operations. But generally speaking, at a very, very high level, there's essentially 2 modes of operation for the reservoir. And as Ava said, it's seasonal. And those 2 modes are when there is basin runoff and when there are lake releases. As Lieutenant Colonel Polk said, the reservoir is primarily dedicated to that basin runoff and that basin attenuation. And that's what its main purpose and function is. But I'm sure that for those of you that are interested, we can more fully describe those operations and get you that document for the preliminary project operating manual.
I just want to thank all of you all for being on these meetings, because this is the kind of communication that just really lets people understand how these complex systems work. And it's very interesting. And I'm not able to go to those meetings that they have during the weeks on how, the more detailed stuff. So a lot of us get our information at meetings like this secondhand, and getting it firsthand from you all is awesome. So please keep coming.
Yeah, thank you. Very much appreciate that. We have some other announcements. I don't believe Riverkeeper updates are here. I know Mike Connor wasn't able to make a call. I do see some other postings and things on the chat function. Appreciate that. Vincent put up the thing about the flyer for the, for the upcoming things for the Water Ambassadors program that they host. I know, I think, do we have that flyer up, Daryl? Could we put that? Is there a flyer that goes up with that? And while we're waiting for that, any other announcements from any members of the coalition at this time? All right. Okay.
Sorry, Mark. I don't have it. That link is to Vincent's page there, but I don't have a flyer for that event. But
okay.
Thank you. And Mark, if you could share that C23 canal ribbon cutting, that would be exciting, since I live right in back of where the C23 dumps into the North Fork of the river. I was fortunate to be there for the C44 ribbon cutting, and I would enjoy being there for this one. Thank you.
Yep. That's on February 18th, Friday, February 18th. All right. Well, we're pretty much on time. Yeah, I heard somebody comment.
It's Zach Judd here from Florida Oceanographic Society.
Yeah, Zach.
Just wanted to mention that we're in the middle of our annual coastal lecture series. And next week on February 1st, we have Dr. Todd Osborne from University of Florida to discuss a clam restoration project in the Indian River Lagoon. It's a project that FOS is partnering with, and it might be of interest to some of the members. I will put a link to our lecture series website on the chat box.
That's good to know. Thank you, Zach, for bringing that up. And at this Water Ambassadors meeting that's coming up, I know that it was mentioned that Florida Oceanographic is also going to be talking with Dr. Lorraine Simpson. She's featuring the seagrass efforts that we're working on as well. So any kind of announcements like that, please get them to Barbara Osborne, and also to Mickey, who's going to be, there we go, there's the virtual. It's enhancement of oyster restoration through assessing the impacts on living docks and oyster program. These are Sarah Cole and Morgan Gilligan are two scientists here at Florida Oceanographic, and they do tremendous work on doing that program. So I encourage you to attend that. And then also our lecture series, as Zach Judd said, he'll put that into the chat function as well. So with that, Daryl, we see Walter, you have your hand up. You got a question?
Just wanted to wish Eve Samples a happy birthday.
I saw that in your chat. Thank you
birthday,
for bringing that.
Thank you. That is very kind. I appreciate it. I wouldn't want to spend it any other way.
Well, again, our thanks to all the Water Management District folks and all the Corps of Engineers for being on the site, and all of you as member organizations working really hard to fight for clean water in the St. Lucie River and Indian River Lagoon. Appreciate it very much. And with that, we'll adjourn the meeting and look forward to seeing you next month at our next monthly meeting, if not before. Thanks,
Thank you, Mark.
guys. Stay tuned. Bye-bye now.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Stay safe.